You know that feeling when you stumble across something, maybe an old film, and you think, wow, how did I miss this? A real classic from like cinema's golden age, just waiting for a fresh look.
Oh, yeah, that thrill of rediscovery. It's fantastic.
It really is. And that's kind of what we do here on the deep dive. We look for those public gems, brilliant stuff from the past that maybe got overlooked but is out there now for everyone.
Exactly.
And today we're diving into a film that is the perfect example of that, a real piece of cinematic history.
We are indeed talking about Buster Keaton's amazing 1926 silent comedy, The General.
Ah, The General.
Yeah. And we've got, well, a ton of material to dig into. Critical analyses spanning, gosh, almost 100 years now. Historical accounts of the production. Its legacy. It's quite a story.
So what's the mission today? What are we trying to unpack here?
Well, the really fascinating thing, the paradox, is how this film started out as a massive failure. Critically, financially, just bombed. But then, over time, it transformed into this hugely revered masterpiece, like top-tier cinema history. So how does that happen? What makes something truly timeless when it starts out like that?
That's a great question. So let's start at the beginning. Where did the idea even come from?
Okay, so the origin is pretty cool. It's based on a real event, the Great Locomotive Chase from 1862 during the American Civil War.
A true story?
Yep. Adapted from a memoir written way back in 1889 by a guy named William Pittenger. And the thing is, Buster Keaton himself was a huge train enthusiast. Apparently, he'd read this book.
Oh, really? So he had a personal connection.
Definitely. And he wasn't just the star playing Johnny Gray, the engineer. He also co-directed it with Clyde Bruckman.
Interesting.
And here's a key thing. Pittenger's book was from the Union perspective. But Keaton, he made a conscious choice to flip it, tell the story from the Confederate side.
Why do that?
His thinking, apparently, was that audiences back then wouldn't really accept the Confederates as, the villains of the piece.
Yeah. Okay, so that ambition, telling this real story, flipping the perspective, sounds like it set the stage for a big production.
Oh, big is an understatement.
Yeah.
And troubled, too. The budget was just enormous for 1926. Joseph Schenck, the studio head, put up $750,000.
That's a lot of money back then.
It was huge. And rumors started swirling. It was closer to $1 million. Schenck was reportedly furious about the costs.
I bet. And they shot on location, right? Not in a studio.
Right. They went up to Cottage Grove, Oregon.
Yeah.
Because they had these old-fashioned railroads that looked right for the period. And get this, they actually bought 3 vintage locomotives.
What them?
Yep. 2 to play the General, Johnny's engine, and 1 for the Texas, the other train, the one they famously wrecked on purpose later. Wow. And to manage all this, they shipped 18 freight cars full of props and sets all the way from L.A. Cannon's rebuilt passenger cars, stagecoaches, the works.
18 freight cars. That's an incredible undertaking for the 1920s. What was it like on location with all that gear and people?
Well, it sounds kind of fun in some ways, but the reality was costly and dangerous. A press release claimed it cost $400 an hour to make the film.
$400 an hour?
In 1926 money.
Yeah.
And the budget just kept climbing. Lots of accidents on set. Keaton himself got knocked unconscious.
Oh, wow.
An assistant director got hurt. A brakeman had a train wheel run over his foot that led to a lawsuit, nearly $3,000.
Ouch.
And fires. Because the engines were wood burning, they kept setting fires. Forests, haystacks. They had to pay farmers $25 for every haystack that burned. One fire got so bad it cost $50,000, and they had to pack up and go back to L.A. for a bit.
Man, constant problems.
Yeah, but you also hear these, lighter stories. They hired 1,500 locals as extras. Huge deal for the town. Marion Mack, the lead actress, said Keaton was totally focused, stuck to his work. But other accounts say the cast and crew would, stop the train if they saw a good spot to play baseball.
That's brilliant. Amidst all the chaos and cost.
Yeah, gives you a picture, right?
Definitely. So with all that scale, what was the biggest, most ambitious, maybe the craziest part of the shoot?
Oh, that has to be the climax. The train wreck. Intentionally driving the Texas locomotive off that collapsing bridge, the Rock River Bridge.
The famous scene.
The very famous scene. That one shot cost $42,000.
$42,000 for one shot.
Yep. The single most expensive shot in silent film history. They made a huge event out of it. The town declared a holiday. 3,000 or 4,000 people came out to watch, plus 500 extras from the Oregon National Guard.
Wow. Just to watch a train wreck.
It was a spectacle.
Yeah.
And they just left the wreckage there in the river, became a sort of tourist spot for 20 years until they salvaged it for scrap during World War II.
Incredible. So, okay, monumental effort, huge cost, danger, spectacle. The film finally gets finished. It actually premieres first in Tokyo. That's unusual.
Yeah, December 1926. Its big U.S. premiere in New York at the Capitol Theater was supposed to be January 27, but it got delayed. Another movie, Flesh and the Devil with Greta Garbo, was just massive, so they held the general back.
Ah, okay. So when it finally opened in the U.S. in February 27, how did it do after all that?
Disaster. Remember that $750,000 budget?
Yeah.
It only made back about $474,000 domestically. A huge financial failure.
Oof. And the critics.
Just as bad. Maybe worse. Variety was brutal, called it far from funny, flat out said it was a flop.
Ouch.
The New York Times said, the fun is not exactly plentiful. Said it wasn't as good as Keaton's earlier stuff. The Los Angeles Times said it drags terribly.
So pretty much universal panning.
Pretty much. And maybe the most famous knock came from Robert D. Sherwood, a prominent writer. He said, and this is cutting, someone should have told Buster Keaton that it is difficult to derive laughter from the sight of men being killed in battle.
Wow. So they just didn't get it or didn't like the tone.
Seems that way. A complete rejection, really.
So what did that mean for Keaton, this massive, expensive project?
Yeah.
Bombs financially, gets terrible reviews. What were the consequences for him?
It was devastating. Professionally, I mean. The financial failure of the General essentially cost him his independence. He'd been making films his way, with creative control.
Right.
But after this, he was forced into signing a contract with the big studio, MGM Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And most film historians see that as basically the beginning of the end for his unique style and creative freedom. The studio system just wasn't set up for his kind of filmmaking.
So the failure of this film directly led to him losing control.
Directly.
Yeah.
Which brings us right back to that central question, doesn't it? How does that film, the flop that crippled its creator's independence, eventually become hailed as, one of the greatest films ever made?
Right. It's an amazing turnaround. So let's talk about the film itself. What is the story and what made the action so special?
Okay, the plot itself is actually pretty straightforward, but it's executed brilliantly as this action-comedy hybrid. You've got Johnny Gray, the engineer in the Confederacy, and he has two loves, his fiancée, Annabelle Lee, and his locomotive, the General.
Wait, engine and fiancé.
Exactly. War breaks out. Johnny tries to enlist to impress Annabelle, but he gets rejected. They tell him he's more valuable as an engineer, but crucially, they don't explain why. So Annabelle thinks he's a coward.
Awkward.
Very. Then the main action starts. Union spies steal the General, and oops, Annabelle happens to be on board.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Their plan is to race north, burning railway bridges to mess up Confederate supply lines.
Yeah.
Johnny sees his engine being stolen with Annabelle on it and just takes off after them.
Alone?
Just chases a train, on foot at first. Then he finds a handcar. Then this old-timey bicycle, a bone shaker. It's incredible physical comedy. Eventually, he manages to grab another engine, the Texas, and the real chase is on.
The pursuit.
Exactly. The Union spies try everything to stop him. They drop obstacles on the track, disconnect cars. Johnny has to deal with all of it while driving the train solo. At one point, he realizes he's accidentally left his own troops behind. He has to hide out behind enemy lines.
And that's where things shift, right?
Precisely. He overhears the Union officers planning a surprise attack. He finds out the Rock River Bridge is key to their supply route. And he finds Annabelle. They team up to steal the General back.
So the chase reverses.
Totally. Now, Johnny and Annabelle are racing south in the General, trying to warn the Confederate Army with the Union trains chasing them. He has to fend them off and try to sabotage the Union advance.
Which leads to the bridge scene.
Right. He sets a fire on the Rock River Bridge to block the Union pursuit. And then comes the big moment. The Texas drives onto the burning bridge, and the whole thing collapses in this spectacular wreck.
The $42,000 shot.
That's the one. Johnny manages to warn the Confederate commander. He even captures a Union officer, gets hailed as a hero, commissioned as a lieutenant.
And the ending is great, too.
Oh, it's classic Keaton. He's finally reunited with Annabelle, trying to kiss her. But soldiers keep walking past and saluting him because he's an officer now. So he's trying to awkwardly salute back while still embracing her. It's brilliant.
It really is. And underpinning all that action are Keaton's stunts. They're legendary for a reason.
Absolutely legendary. And the key thing to remember is this was real. No CGI, no trick editing for the most part. That was him.
Doing incredibly dangerous things.
Insanely dangerous, like jumping between moving train cars, engine to tender to boxcar, running along the roofs of moving cars.
Makes me nervous just thinking about it.
And then there are the really, really risky ones. There's a bit where he has to pull a railroad tie off the track just before the train gets there.
Right.
And then he actually sits on the cowcatcher, that metal frame on the very front of the engine.
Okay.
While the train is moving, holding the tie he just pulled up, and he throws it precisely at another tie on the track to knock it out of the way.
That's insane precision required. If he misses.
Or if he didn't get the first tie out in time, derailment. Could have been killed. Easily.
Yeah.
Another one, he sits on the coupling rods, those big metal bars connecting the locomotive's wheels.
Oh, I know the one.
If those wheels had spun unexpectedly, or if something caught, it's terrifying. These were done often in one take. It shows his incredible physical skill, bravery, and, well, dedication to getting the shot.
Truly astonishing. So, okay, we have this film. Incredible stunts, great story, huge production. But it bombs. How does it go from that, from flop to masterpiece? What changed?
Well, a huge turning point was technical, almost accidental. In 1954, the film's copyright wasn't renewed in the U.S. It fell into the public domain.
Meaning anyone could show it, copy it.
Basically, yes. Suddenly, it became much more accessible. People could see it on TV and film societies, universities. A whole new audience discovered it decades after its release.
Yeah.
And Keaton himself knew what he had. Later in life, he said, "I was more proud of that picture than any I ever made." He recognized its quality even when others didn't initially.
So public access was key. And then the critical reevaluation started.
Exactly. It took time, but the perspective shifted dramatically. Think about this. In 1989, when the U.S. Library of Congress started the National Film Registry, choosing films to preserve for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Yeah.
The General was in the very first group selected.
Yeah.
Right alongside films like Casablanca, Citizen Kane, Star Wars, Gone with the Wind.
Wow. That's incredible company. From flop to national treasure.
Pretty much. And the praise from other filmmakers and critics became immense. Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Orson Welles called it the greatest comedy ever made, the greatest Civil War film ever made, and perhaps the greatest film ever made.
That's quite the endorsement.
Right. A triple crown, like
Yeah.
you said. And it consistently performed well in those prestigious Sight and Sound polls of the greatest films. It was like number 8 in 72, number 10 in 82. Still ranked 34th by critics in 2012. Roger Ebert loved it, put it on his great movies list.
So the consensus completely flipped.
Completely. The American Film Institute ranked it high on both their comedy list and their overall best movies list. Number 18 on both, actually. People started appreciating the artistry, the visual storytelling, the choreography of the action, the authenticity. Critics like David Robinson compared its look to Matthew Brady's Civil War photos. Raymond Durnett praised its spare, gray photography and beautifully sustained movement.
They saw the genius that was missed the first time around.
Exactly. They recognized the sheer cinematic craft involved.
And it's important, too, to look at its legacy with a modern eye, right? There are other perspectives now.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of understanding its journey. For instance, some contemporary critics like Eileen Jones, writing in Jacobin, acknowledge it as a comic masterpiece, but also, importantly, point out how it reflects the lost cause of the Confederacy ideology.
Right, that romanticized view of the Confederacy.
Precisely. Yeah. So it's crucial to appreciate the film's artistry while also, critically examining its historical context and the perspective it chose to adopt back in 1926.
Yeah.
We report on that. We don't endorse it, but it's part of the film's complex story.
Understood. A balanced view. And that public domain status you mentioned, that's really allowed it to live on in interesting ways, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's incredibly accessible now. The Blu-ray release back in 2009 was apparently the first time any silent feature got an HD release in the U.S.
Wow, leading the way even then.
In a sense, yeah. And because it is public domain, people create new scores for it. Raymond Rohauer did one back in the 50s. Carl Davis composed a very famous one in the 80s. Orchestras commission new scores for live screenings. It keeps the film alive and fresh.
That's fantastic. Any other interesting bits of legacy?
Well, besides the train wreckage being a tourist spot, there's a mural in Cottage Grove, Oregon, the town where they filmed so much of it. And film writer David Thompson speculates that mural might be the only memorial in the United States to Buster Keaton.
Huh. A mural in Oregon. A unique tribute.
Isn't it? For a film that almost ended his career, it just refused to fade away.
So when you wrap it all up, what's the big takeaway from the General's journey? From failure to icon?
I think it's a really powerful story about, how art endures, how initial reception isn't always the final word. Tastes change, perspectives shift. Keaton's genius was undeniable, even if it took decades for widespread recognition. It shows that sometimes, a work is just ahead of its time, and the world eventually catches up. It's about reassessment, rediscovery.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How many other potential public gems are out there? Films or, other works of art that were dismissed initially but might deserve a second look. It definitely challenges us to maybe question those first impressions, dig a bit deeper, especially with older works. So if you haven't seen it, you really should seek out The General. See for yourself why this incredible film, this initial flop, fought its way back to become a true cornerstone of cinema. It's quite an experience.